Oren Voss had seen a lot of strange things in his life. As a former space pilot, he had flown through asteroid storms, fought off pirate raids, and once even had to escape a burning spaceship with nothing but a faulty jetpack. But nothing compared to the sight in front of him now. A spaceship, sleek and alien, had landed just outside his home on the colony world of Vesper 3. It was unlike anything built by humans. Smooth silver plating, glowing blue patterns along its hull, and a quiet hum that made the air tingle. The ship's ramp had lowered with a slow hiss, and from within stepped a woman unlike any he had ever seen. She was tall, her silver blue skin shimmering under the twin suns. Her golden eyes glowed softly, scanning him with quiet intensity. Long, dark blue hair cascaded down her back, held in place by a metal circlet that looked both regal and battle-worn. She wore a sleek, armored bodysuit, the design unfamiliar but clearly built for both elegance and war. Oren, still holding his morning cup of coffee, blinked. What in the hell was he looking at? Then, before he could even ask, she spoke. "I came here to marry you, human." Oren almost choked on his coffee. "You what?" The woman stepped forward, standing tall and proud. "I am Alara of House Velari, first daughter of the Silver Throne. According to our ancient laws, a great war will consume my people unless I fulfill a prophecy. That prophecy states that I must take a human mate." Oren stared at her, then at her ship, then back at her. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong guy." Alara's expression remained calm, but her glowing eyes narrowed slightly. "There is no mistake. My people's seers have seen the future. You are the one." Oren ran a hand down his face. He wasn't even sure what to process first. The fact that aliens apparently had prophecies about humans, or that this alien woman was standing here, demanding marriage like she was ordering lunch. He sighed. "Listen, Alara, was it? I'm flattered, really, but I'm just a guy trying to live in peace. I'm not interested in—" A loud beep interrupted him. Alara touched a device on her wrist, her face darkening as she read the holographic display. Oren suddenly felt very uneasy. "What?" he asked. Alara's golden gaze locked onto his. "They're here." Before Oren could ask who they were, the sky above them cracked with the arrival of more alien ships. Dark, menacing, and bristling with weapons, they hovered like predators preparing to strike. Oren cursed under his breath. Whatever this was, it wasn't just some weird misunderstanding, and he had a feeling that his quiet life was officially over. Oren felt a chill crawl up his spine as the dark ships descended from the sky, their massive shadows casting over his home. The sound of their engines rumbled like thunder, and Oren's first instinct was to run. But he couldn't. Not with Alara standing right there, calm as ever, her expression hardening as she looked up at the ships. "They've come for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was a sharp edge to it. Oren's heart raced. He glanced at her, then back at the descending ships, trying to make sense of the situation. What did she mean by that? His mind was spinning. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice tight. "Kalos, the prince of the Velari. He has come to take me back." Oren frowned. "Back? Why?" Alara looked at him, her eyes flickering with something that resembled pain. "I am engaged to him, by the laws of my people, but I no longer wish to marry him. He is cruel, and his ambition is dangerous." Her eyes turned cold, hard. "I would rather die than marry him." Oren's confusion deepened, but before he could ask any more questions, a loud voice boomed from the ships above. "Alara." It was a male voice, arrogant and demanding. Oren's skin prickled as he looked up. A man stood in the doorway of one of the ships, his silhouette dark against the glowing sky. Even from this distance, Oren could feel the weight of the man's presence, as though he was someone who didn't take no for an answer. "Come down, princess," the voice continued. "You are coming back with me, whether you like it or not." Alara didn't flinch. She stood tall, facing the ships, Orin noticed how she looked almost like a warrior ready for battle, her hand resting on the hilt of the weapon strapped to her side. "Kalos," Allura said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I am no longer your bride. You have no claim over me." There was a pause. Then, Kalos's voice echoed again, more menacing this time. "I do not ask for your consent, Allura. This will be decided by blood." Orin stepped forward, his chest tightening. This was no longer just a strange alien proposal. This was something much bigger. The air around them seemed to crackle with hostility as the ships hovered closer, their weapons coming online with a terrifying hum. Allura looked at him, her golden eyes intense. "You need to understand, Orin. This is not just about a marriage. My people are bound by an ancient prophecy. Only a human mate can prevent a cataclysmic war between our factions. If I marry Kalos, war will break out. If I marry you, the war can be avoided. The future of my people, and yours, depends on this." Orin stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. He barely knew Allura. How could he even trust her? And yet, something about her words struck a chord in him. Something inside him urged him to believe her. He couldn't explain it. It was like a deep, primal instinct, one that told him that this was no coincidence. "Wait," he finally said, shaking his head, still trying to process everything. "You want me to marry you, to save both our people from war?" Allura nodded. "Yes, I came here because I had no choice." Orin looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He knew he couldn't ignore what was at stake. This wasn't just about him anymore. He glanced up at the ships, their guns primed and ready. There was no time to hesitate. If he refused, they would all be dead before the night was over. "I'll do it," Orin said, his voice steady. Allura's eyes softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of relief. She stepped closer to him, her expression serious. "We don't have much time. Kalos will not wait long. We must leave before he forces my hand." Orin nodded. This wasn't just about marriage anymore. It was about survival. He turned toward the ship, and Allura followed. As they boarded the alien vessel, Orin couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about the universe had just been turned upside down. And this strange woman who had come from another world to marry him was the key to everything. The moment Orin stepped inside the alien ship with Allura, the door sealed shut behind them with a heavy thud, cutting off any escape. He felt the ship hum to life beneath him, and the familiar discomfort of high-speed travel made his stomach lurch. He had been on ships like this before, but never in a situation like this. Allura stood at the front of the ship, her posture strong and unyielding, as if she had faced danger like this before. But Orin could see the tension in her shoulders, the fear she was trying to hide. As the ship ascended into the sky, Orin couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. He had just agreed to marry someone he barely knew to prevent an intergalactic war, and now a prince was chasing them, hell-bent on forcing Allura into an unwanted engagement. His life had never been so complicated. "How long until we're safe?" Orin asked, his eyes fixed on the viewport as they left the atmosphere of Vesper 3 behind. Allura's gaze was unwavering as she answered, "Not long. They'll pursue us across the stars. Kalos doesn't take kindly to being denied." Orin frowned. "So this guy really is a piece of work, huh?" Allura didn't look at him, but her lips curled into a bitter smile. "He is ambitious, manipulative, and dangerous. When he wants something, he takes it, no matter the cost." Her voice grew colder. "He believes that because he is of royal blood, he has the right to rule, to command, to own. It's how he was raised, and it's how he believes the galaxy should work." Orin shook his head, feeling a sense of dread creep in. This was bigger than just a fight for Allura's hand in marriage. This was about power, control, and the fate of an entire empire. He had no idea what kind of trouble he had just walked into, but one thing was certain. He couldn't turn back now. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped, and a warning flashed on the screen. Oren's heart skipped a beat. Incoming. Alara barked. Before Oren could ask what that meant, a blast rocked the ship, throwing him against the wall. The ship's alarms blared, and Alara's eyes flashed with determination. She moved with practiced grace, her fingers flying over the ship's controls. "They found us," Alara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Brace yourself." Another explosion hit, shaking the ship even harder. Oren stumbled, barely managing to catch himself. Through the viewport, he saw a dark, massive ship closing in on them. It was an intimidating sight, sleek, black, and menacing, with Kalos's insignia emblazoned on the side. Oren's heart pounded. They weren't getting away this time. "This is Prince Kalos's flagship," Alara muttered, her face hardening. "He won't stop until he has me back." Oren's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the controls. "So what's our next move?" Alara turned to him, her golden eyes fierce. "We fight." She didn't hesitate, pressing a button to activate the ship's defensive systems. Oren's stomach dropped as the ship lurched again, this time evading fire from Kalos's flagship. The ship's speed increased, the stars outside becoming a blur as they raced away. Oren could feel the tension in the air as Alara expertly piloted the ship, evading the incoming laser blasts. But then, another explosion rocked the hull, this one even more violent than the last. Oren struggled to hold onto his seat as the ship jolted, the lights flickering. "They're not going to let up, are they?" Oren said, his voice tense. Alara's face was grim as she punched in a series of commands. "Kalos will follow us to the ends of the galaxy if he has to. He's never taken a rejection well." Alara glanced at him, her golden eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read. Asterisk, that's why we need to find a way to end this. Asterisk, before he forces my people into war." Oren's mind raced. He had never been one for grand heroics, but now, with the stakes higher than ever, he knew he had to step up. There was no running from this fight. And the worst part, the battle was just beginning. The ship continued to shake as it fought against the relentless assault from Kalos's flagship. Oren gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white, his mind racing with thoughts of survival. He had never been in a space battle quite like this. Blasts of energy, the sound of engines roaring as they accelerated to impossible speeds, and all the while, Alara remained calm, her fingers dancing over the controls with incredible precision. "We need to lose them, Alara." Oren's voice was strained, filled with urgency. He could feel the heat from the ship's engines, the way the hull seemed to vibrate as it fought against Kalos's superior firepower. "We will." Alara's response was cool, but there was a steely determination in her eyes. Asterisk scheme taking us into the nebula of Arkul. It's a dangerous place, but it will confuse their tracking systems. If we can make it there, we can hide long enough to regroup. The nebula of Arkul. Oren had heard of it. The swirling colors of gas and dust created a disorienting maze that even the most advanced ships had trouble navigating. It was a place of beauty and danger, a place where few ships ventured unless they had no other choice. "Are you sure about this?" Oren asked, not entirely convinced. The nebula was a death trap, and there was a real chance they could get lost in it. But right now, the idea of being caught by Kalos was far worse. "It's our only chance. Trust me." Oren nodded, feeling a mix of fear and admiration for Alara. She was fearless in the face of danger, willing to take risks that most would avoid. She wasn't just running from Kalos, she was fighting every step of the way. The ship jerked again, another hit from Kalos's flagship. The shields flickered, but they held. "For now." "Hold on," Alara warned, her voice tight with focus. She pushed a few more buttons, and the ship veered sharply to the left, heading straight for the nebula of Arkul. The stars outside shifted, blurring as the ship entered the nebula. Oren could barely see anything as thick clouds of gas surrounded them, the vibrant colors swirling around like living things. It was beautiful, yes, but also terrifying. The ship seemed to move slower in the mist, the controls more difficult to manage. "We're in." Alara's voice was calm, but Orin could hear the underlying tension in it. They were now in the heart of the nebula, and they were at its mercy. Orin watched the sensors, trying to get a read on their surroundings. The nebula made everything seem distorted, as if the very laws of physics were being twisted. But one thing was clear: Kalos's ship had followed them in. The enemy ship's engines glowed faintly in the distance, moving cautiously through the nebula as it tried to find a way around the thick clouds of gas. "Kalos won't stop until he has me." Alara's voice was steady, but Orin could sense the weight of her words. The prince wouldn't give up easily, not with everything he had at stake. And Alara wasn't just some prize to be claimed. She was a symbol of power, of the future of her people. "We need to figure out what to do next, Alara." Orin's voice was urgent. The last thing they wanted was to get cornered in the nebula. "They'll keep hunting us." Alara's gaze hardened, and for the first time, she looked truly dangerous. "I know, but this isn't just about Kalos anymore. This is about my people, Orin. And it's about what I'm willing to do to protect them." She turned to face him, her golden eyes blazing with resolve. "I've been running from my destiny for too long. It's time to take control." Orin stared at her, his mind racing. He could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire he had seen in warriors on the front lines, the same fire that made them willing to sacrifice everything for their cause. "What do you need from me?" Orin asked, his voice steady. Alara didn't hesitate. "I need you to fight. I need you to stand with me, not just as my fiancé, but as my partner. Together, we can stop Kalos. Together, we can change the fate of my people." Orin felt a weight settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting for something bigger than himself. "I'm with you, Alara." He said it without hesitation. And in that moment, he realized that whatever came next, he wasn't going to face it alone. Outside, the nebula raged, and Kalos's ship was still out there, waiting. The storm had only just begun. The nebula was like a vast ocean of gas and light, swirling around them in a colorful mist. Orin couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he looked out the viewport. But there was no time to appreciate the beauty of it. The sound of Kalos's flagship closing in on them was too real, too imminent. Alara's fingers flew over the controls, expertly navigating the ship through the dense fog. The ship jolted occasionally as they flew through the unstable clouds of the nebula, but Alara held her focus. She had lived in the galaxy long enough to know that space was never truly empty. There were always dangers lurking, and now they were surrounded by an entire nebula's worth of them. "Do you think this will work?" Orin asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "It has to." Alara's response was clipped, though her eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. She wasn't used to relying on chance, and yet here they were, depending on a random twist of fate to keep them safe. "Kalos is stubborn, but he's not foolish. He'll know we're hiding in here. The only way we can survive is if we make him think we've lost him entirely." Orin glanced at the console, noticing the readings were fluctuating wildly as the ship's systems struggled to get a clear signal through the dense nebula. "You really think we can outsmart him?" Alara hesitated for a brief moment before nodding. "We don't have any other choice." The tension between them was thick. Orin had already been dragged into a conflict far larger than he could have ever imagined. And now his survival was tied to this woman's fight against a power-hungry prince. The weight of the situation settled heavily on his chest, but his instincts were screaming at him to push forward. As if on cue, a warning flashed on the console. Kalos's flagship was closing in. "We're running out of time," Orin muttered. "What now?" Alara's lips pressed into a thin line. "We take a risk." Orin looked at her, alarmed. "A risk? What kind of risk?" She met his gaze, her golden eyes steady. "There's a hidden station within the nebula. It's a relic from an old war, abandoned for centuries. It's not on any maps, and it's not registered in any known databases. If we can reach it, we can hide long enough for Kalos to give up searching. But it's a dangerous place. Orin swallowed hard. And you want to take us there? Alara didn't answer immediately, instead focusing on the controls. We have no other options. The tension was unbearable as Alara adjusted their course, and the ship began to move at a faster pace, weaving through the nebula's chaotic clouds. Orin clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest as the ship dodged around giant, swirling energy clusters that could fry the ship in an instant. Every few seconds, a flash of bright light would explode in the distance, and the ship would jolt again as if it, too, was trying to avoid the deadly force of the nebula. As they neared the coordinates Alara had set, Orin couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading straight into the lion's den. Whatever lay ahead was unknown, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. How do you even know this place exists? Alara glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I've been to worse places than this. This is nothing compared to the battlefields of Vesper 4. Orin couldn't help but admire her courage, but there was still one question that bothered him. What happens if Kalos finds us? Alara's smile faded, and for a moment her gaze was distant, filled with regret. Then we make our stand. Before Orin could ask anything else, the ship's sensors began to beep wildly. Alara's fingers danced across the console, pulling up a map of their surroundings. We're here. Through the swirling mists of the nebula, a faint, jagged structure began to emerge. A station, hidden deep within the heart of the nebula. It was old, its surface cracked and weathered from centuries of neglect. But it was there, and it was their only hope. As Alara guided the ship toward the station, Orin felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time since this all began, they might actually have a chance. But he couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still waiting for them inside the forgotten station. The only thing they could do now was take the gamble, and hope they didn't lose everything in the process. Alara's voice broke through the silence. Get ready, Orin. This is about to get even more interesting. The old station loomed ahead, its surface cracked and weathered by time and neglect. It was a far cry from the sleek, modern ships Orin had seen in the past, its jagged edges giving it a look of abandonment. But for now, it was the only hope they had. Alara's eyes never left the station as she expertly maneuvered the ship toward it. The nebula around them continued to swirl and pulse with dangerous energy, but she seemed undeterred. She had faced worse, and this was just another challenge to overcome. Orin couldn't help but feel a surge of respect for her. She was more than just a warrior. She was a survivor, and that made her an invaluable ally in this battle. We're almost there. Alara's voice was calm, but there was an edge of determination in it. She knew this was their only shot, and she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. The ship slowly drifted toward the station's docking bay, a gaping hole in the structure where a proper entrance had once been. It looked like the station had been abandoned for centuries, and yet the faintest hum of power still lingered within its walls. It was as if the station was still alive, waiting for something, or someone, to awaken it. As Alara guided the ship inside, Orin couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. There was something unsettling about this place, something ancient and powerful. The energy readings from the station were erratic, fluctuating wildly as if the very core of the station was unstable. You sure this is safe? Orin asked, his voice laced with doubt. Alara's gaze remained steady as she finished docking the ship. We don't have much of a choice. If we stay out there too long, Kalos will catch us. She glanced over at Orin, a flicker of concern passing through her eyes. I'll be honest with you, Orin. This station has secrets, old ones, dangerous ones. But if we're lucky, it might just give us the edge we need. Orin swallowed hard, his unease growing. What kind of secrets? Alara didn't answer immediately. She unstrapped herself from the pilot's chair and stood, moving toward the exit. Only one way to find out. The door to the ship hissed open, and Orin followed Alara as she stepped into the dimly lit hallway of the station. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of old machinery and rust. The walls were lined with ancient panels, most of them cracked and faded with time. But in the distance, a soft blue light flickered, casting an eerie glow across the room. Alara led the way, her steps purposeful and confident. Orin couldn't help but feel like an intruder in this forgotten place. It was clear that whatever lay ahead was not meant for anyone to find. They made their way deeper into the station, the silence around them growing heavier with each step. The further they went, the more the temperature seemed to drop, until Orin's breath misted in the air. Alara seemed unfazed, but Orin couldn't help but shiver. As they reached the center of the station, they found what they were looking for, a massive control room, filled with ancient consoles and machinery. The room was larger than anything Orin had ever seen before, with towering columns and a high ceiling that seemed to stretch into darkness. In the center of the room, a large holographic display flickered to life, showing a map of the nebula and the surrounding star systems. Alara moved forward, her fingers touching the controls. "This is it." She sounded almost reverent, as if she had discovered something sacred. This station was once the headquarters of an ancient war fleet. It's not just a station, it's a weapon. Orin stared at the hologram, a mix of awe and fear in his eyes. A weapon? Alara nodded, her face set with determination. A weapon powerful enough to change the course of the war. If we can figure out how to use it, we might just have a chance against Kalos. The air around them seemed to grow colder, the hum of the station growing louder, as if it were waking up. Orin felt a shiver run down his spine. This was no ordinary station, and what they were about to uncover could be more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. But one thing was clear: this was the only chance they had. The stakes had just gotten higher. Now they had to decide if they were willing to unlock the secrets of the forgotten station, or if they would be consumed by the power within. The hum of the ancient station grew louder, its machinery stirring as if it were alive. Alara stood in front of the glowing holographic map, her fingers tracing over the control panel. Orin watched her intently, trying to decipher the complex system she was interacting with. The room was thick with tension. Whatever lay ahead, whatever power this station held, could change everything. "Alara, do you know how to work this?" Orin asked, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and worry. The hologram flickered again, showing the same map of the nebula and several unknown star systems. But now, there were glowing red markers moving across the map, signs of ships on a course, heading directly toward them. Alara didn't answer immediately. Her brow furrowed as her fingers pressed more buttons. "I know how to read it," she muttered, "but I need to get this thing activated first. If I can tap into the core systems, we can use it to fight back. But there's a lot I still don't understand." Orin took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of weapon are we talking about?" Alara glanced over her shoulder, her eyes glowing with a fierce resolve. "This station was built by the First Galactic Empire. It's not just a weapon. It's a fortress, capable of controlling fleets, even entire planets. If we can access its full potential, it might be powerful enough to challenge Kalos himself." A chill ran through Orin at her words. This was no ordinary technology. This was a weapon that had shaped the galaxy, a weapon that could turn the tide of the entire war. But with power like that came great risk. The control room they stood in, the forgotten corners of the station, they were all tangled in an ancient web of secrets. What if they unleashed something they couldn't control? Alara was already adjusting the settings on the console. "Just a little more," she murmured. The glow from the map brightened, and then the entire room shifted. A loud, mechanical noise filled the air as the station came to life, its once dormant systems now waking up. "We're activating it," Alara said, her voice trembling slightly. "Orin, we need to be quick. Once this thing powers up, Kalos will know exactly where we are. Orin's pulse quickened as the walls around them began to shift, revealing massive machinery hidden beneath the station's decaying exterior. The ground beneath their feet shook, and a deep rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. Suddenly, the holographic map began to flash, and the lights flickered ominously. Alara's hands flew over the controls with expert precision, but even she couldn't hide the unease in her movements. The more she interacted with the station's systems, the more Orin realized how little they truly understood what they were dealing with. "Alara, what's happening?" Orin demanded, his voice urgent as the station continued to shake. "It's activating. But something's wrong," she replied, her eyes wide with concern. The station was supposed to be dormant, but it's drawing power from somewhere else. The core isn't just reactivating. It's siphoning energy from the nebula. It's using the very forces around us. Orin's eyes widened as the map shifted again. The red markers were now close, too close. Alara had triggered a beacon, a signal that could be tracked by any ship in the sector. Kalos' fleet would be here soon. "We've got to move, Alara," Orin said, his heart racing. Alara nodded, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I know, but if we shut it down now, we might lose our chance at using it against Kalos. We don't have any other choice." Before Orin could respond, a loud screech echoed through the station, followed by a wave of intense heat. The ground beneath their feet buckled, and the room shook violently. Suddenly, the control room doors slammed shut with a force that knocked Orin off his feet. "Alara," Orin shouted, scrambling to get back up. "We're trapped," Alara said, her voice strained as she worked frantically to override the security systems. "We need to stabilize the core, or the whole station will collapse." The intensity of the situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about whether or not they would unleash a force so powerful that they would be unable to contain it. The power of the station was rising, and they were caught in its grip. "Orin, I need you to trust me," Alara said, her eyes locking with his. "We can do this, but we have to act now." Orin nodded, determination settling over him like a weight. Alara had never steered him wrong before, and despite the risk, he knew that if they didn't take action now, Kalos would destroy everything they were fighting for. The countdown on the control panel flashed in red, signaling that they were seconds away from either activating the station's full potential or causing its destructive collapse. "Let's do it, Alara," Orin said, stepping toward her. Together, the countdown continued, ticking away the seconds, each one heavier than the last. Orin's heart raced in time with the flashing red numbers on the control panel. He glanced at Alara, who was still working with incredible precision, her hands flying over the holographic interface, trying to stabilize the energy flow from the station's core. Her face was set in a fierce expression, but even she couldn't hide the tension building in the air. "Alara, we don't have much time." Orin's voice was urgent. He had no idea how much longer they could hold out against whatever was happening to the station. The walls had started to glow a faint blue, pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. "I know, Orin." Alara's voice was low, controlled, but the strain was there. She was pushing herself to the limit. "I can feel it too. The core, it's becoming unstable. The energy is unpredictable." Orin felt a chill run through him. They had just activated the weapon, but now it was as if they had opened a door to something much worse. The station, which had been dormant for centuries, was now alive, and not in a good way. There was something off about the way it hummed, something that didn't sit right with him. Something dark. The walls trembled again, and a low, mechanical groan echoed throughout the station. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the ancient control panels. Orin clenched his fists. There was no turning back now. They had awakened something, but they had no idea what. Suddenly, the hologram on the control panel shifted. It was no longer just a map of the nebula. It showed something new, a fleet of ships, large and menacing, closing in fast. But there was something wrong with the image. The ships were distorted, their edges fuzzy, as if they weren't really there. "What is that?" Orin asked, his voice a whisper. He didn't like the way the ships seemed to flicker in and out of existence, as if they were a mirage. "It's Kalos's fleet." Alara's voice was sharp with realization. "But those aren't just normal ships. They're cloaked. They're using some kind of technology I've never seen before." Orin's stomach dropped. They were being hunted, and it seemed that Kalos had something far more dangerous at his disposal than they could have imagined. "We've got to act fast." Orin's voice grew more forceful. The enemy was closing in, and they had no idea what kind of firepower they were up against. Alara didn't need any more encouragement. With a steady hand, she initiated a series of commands. The station's lights flickered once more, and the entire control room seemed to hum with new energy. The air grew thick, charged with a power that seemed to push against them, making it hard to breathe. This might work. It might not. Alara glanced at Orin, her eyes full of determination. "But if we can tap into the core's full power, we might be able to turn it against them." Orin nodded, understanding the gamble they were taking. If this failed, they would be trapped in the heart of the station with an enemy fleet on the way. But if it worked, if they could harness the power of the station, then they could have a weapon strong enough to fight back against Kalos. They had to believe it would work. There was no other choice. With a final command, the control panel lit up. A deep rumbling filled the air, and the entire station seemed to shudder as energy flowed from the core and into the station's vast weapon systems. The walls glowed brighter now, their light spilling into the corridors, flooding the darkened space around them. "It's working." Alara's voice was tight with excitement. But then, without warning, the room was plunged into darkness. The light from the core flickered, then went out completely. Alara cursed under her breath and scrambled to pull up the backup systems. "What happened?" Orin asked, panic rising in his chest. "It's sabotage," Alara said grimly. "Someone's done this on purpose." Suddenly, the ship shook violently. Orin stumbled as the entire station seemed to convulse, the rumble of machinery reverberating through the walls. The cloaked ships outside were no longer just a threat on a hologram. They were real, and they were firing. The control room's doors slammed shut with a deafening clang. Alara threw herself against the control panel, trying desperately to bring the systems back online. "We need to stop them." Orin's voice was steady now, the fear replaced by a cold determination. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. Alara met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "Then let's make sure they don't have a chance to win." Together, they faced the unknown, ready to fight for everything they believed in, no matter the cost. The air around them crackled with anticipation. Orin stood beside Alara, his eyes fixed on the massive fleet now emerging from the shadows. The ships glinted in the dark expanse of space, their sleek forms barely visible against the backdrop of stars. But Orin didn't need to see them clearly to know what they were. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Kalos had come, and with him, an army of cloaked ships, more powerful than anything they had ever faced. "They're too many," Orin muttered under his breath, his mind racing. The station's weapons had been activated, but would they be enough to stop Kalos's forces? Alara didn't answer immediately, her hand steady on the control panel as she adjusted the station's targeting system. The energy from the core hummed beneath their feet, sending a pulse through the entire structure. Every moment counted. Every decision was critical. She knew they were outnumbered, but she also knew the power they had in their hands. The station's cannons, if they could be aimed correctly, had the potential to do more damage than Kalos could ever anticipate. But it all depended on them, on her ability to harness the unstable power of the core and direct it with precision. "They're cloaked, but we can still track them with the energy signatures." Alara's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. If we hit them before they can get too close, we might stand a chance. Orin nodded, watching as the first wave of enemy ships advanced. He could see them now, their stealth technology flickering for just a second before their forms solidified in the distance. The cloaking devices weren't perfect. There were still traces of energy leaking from the ships, giving them away. The station's advanced sensors picked up the faintest disturbances in the surrounding space, revealing Kalos's ships like shadows against the stars. "Ready the main cannons," Alara called out, her fingers flying across the controls, locking onto the nearest targets. She wasn't just commanding the station. She was commanding the storm that was about to break loose. The countdown began. Orin's grip tightened on the edge of the console as the tension in the room thickened. It felt like the whole universe was holding its breath, waiting for the first shot to ring out. Kalos's fleet was closing in, their guns already powered and ready to fire. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The station roared to life as Alara hit the final command. The air around them vibrated with the sheer force of the blast, the sound deafening even in the enclosed control room. A brilliant burst of energy shot from the station's core, lighting up the space like a second sun. The first enemy ship was hit, its cloaking system failing instantly under the overwhelming force of the blast. It exploded in a shower of debris, the shockwave rippling outward. Orin's heart skipped a beat. It worked. They had done it. But they weren't out of danger yet. The remaining ships swarmed in, their weapons firing as they attempted to retaliate. Alara was already on the move, her fingers dancing over the controls as she redirected power to the station's shields. They had taken out one ship, but there were still dozens more. "I need more power." Alara gritted her teeth as the station shook under the barrage of enemy fire. The shields were holding, but just barely. Every hit weakened them, pushing them closer to their breaking point. Orin could see the desperation in her eyes, but he also saw the determination. She wasn't about to give up. She never did. "I'm redirecting energy to the secondary cannons," Alara shouted over the noise. The core's unstable power was both their weapon and their greatest risk. They couldn't let it overload. Not now. But if they could concentrate its energy, they might have enough to turn the tide. Another blast shook the station, and this time, Orin felt it in his bones. The shields were nearly gone. He looked out into the vastness of space, at the dark silhouettes of Kalos's ships closing in, preparing for the final strike. They had one shot, one chance to end this. "We need to take them all down, Alara," Orin said, his voice low and steady. He wasn't asking anymore. It was a demand. They had no other choice. "I know." Alara's eyes met his, full of fire. With a final, desperate push, she overloaded the core, sending every ounce of energy it could offer straight into the remaining cannons. The station trembled violently, and for a moment, Orin thought they might be torn apart from the inside out. Then, with a deafening roar, a second blast shot forward, this one far more powerful than the first. It tore through the remaining enemy fleet with unrelenting force, obliterating ship after ship. One by one, the cloaked vessels were torn apart, their destruction sending shockwaves through the station. As the last of Kalos's ships disintegrated in the distance,